You're telling me the humans used duct tape to fix a starship's life support system and then ate the leftover snacks mid-battle? High Chancellor Revik dropped the datapad onto the obsidian desk with a thud that echoed across the circular chamber. Around him, 12 other members of the Galactic Sentience Oversight Tribunal glanced between each other in uneasy silence, their facial ridges and sensory tendrils twitching. The report from Sector G43 wasn't just unusual, it was destabilizing. Every predictive model, every behavioral algorithm, every diplomatic protocol had failed, again. Commander Skelth of the Cathari Confederation tapped his claw against the data crystal embedded in his neural bracer. This is the 7th report in 3 cycles. The humans are not just unpredictable, they're chaotic. They sang sea shanties while disabling our torpedoes, said Minister Vork of the Solari hegemony, voice barely above a whisper. One of them offered us toasted marshmallows during surrender negotiations. He cooked them on his own burning escape pod. Revik raised his head slowly. You are suggesting that chaos is a tactic. No, said Skelth. I am suggesting it is the default state of their existence. The tribunal had gathered after what was supposed to be a minor incursion. A diplomatic expedition turned rescue operation turned full-scale embarrassment. 3 fleets lost without a formal declaration of war, ships rerouted by holographic decoys made out of children's toys. A mining outpost surrendered not through superior firepower, but because the humans insisted on feeding every worker hot soup before continuing the siege. The worst part? The soup was really good. One by one, the aliens began reviewing the footage again. Aboard the bridge of the human vessel, Stubborn Mule, Captain Briggs leaned back in his seat with one leg crossed over the other. He had a bandage on his forehead, a coffee mug in one hand, and an empty chip bag tucked into his jacket. His command crew, also all male, also all strangely relaxed, were laughing over a joke none of the tribunal's AI language cores could properly decode. Why would they fire an empty escape pod at our dreadnought? Demanded Vork, rewinding the footage. Wait, Skelth said, pointing at the screen. Enhance. The tribunal's projector zoomed in. Inside the pod, taped to the wall, was a single note. Made you look. No explosives, no life forms, just psychological warfare in the form of a prank. The dreadnought had wasted 8 salvos and 27 seconds of processor time evading the decoy. Revik turned to the back of the room, where an artificial intelligence module hummed quietly. Summon the analyst who compiled this. I want a direct briefing. The doors hissed open, and a lanky alien with a nervous gait entered the room. Unlike the others, this one wasn't dressed in military garb or council robes. He wore a baggy jumpsuit covered in the stain-resistant polymers and the insignia of a scientific observer. His eye stalks blinked asynchronously, an indication of deep mental exhaustion. My name is Yearn, he said softly. I was embedded with a human vessel for 3 cycles. I wrote the report. You survived? Skelth asked in disbelief. Yearn nodded slowly. Barely. I spent most of the first month trying to understand why their war songs involved lyrics about grandmothers wielding flamethrowers. He cleared his throat and pulled up a holographic timeline. At first, I assumed it was some kind of morale-boosting culture. You know, song and laughter in the face of adversity. But it wasn't just that. They enjoy the confusion they create. They weaponize it. The hologram changed. A battle log displayed human troop movements across fractured terrain, ignoring all logical vectors of attack. They ignored our decoy fields, Yearn continued, but not because they outsmarted them. One of their scouts said, quote, I just had a gut feeling. Another said the decoy field looked too symmetrical to be natural. That's not strategy, it's vibes-based warfare. A few counselors groaned. They sniffed their way through a minefield too, Yearn added, barely audible. One of them said, smells like explosives. Let's take the other path. Vork dropped his datapad. That's not a doctrine. That's witchcraft. Yearn looked at them with a haunted expression. They once won a boarding skirmish by using cargo loaders to perform synchronized dance patterns in the enemy hangar bay. The defenders were so confused they surrendered after assuming it was part of some unknown battle ritual. Skelth's throat sacs puffed out. What is your conclusion? They don't operate on fixed logic, Yearn said. They improvise. They follow instinct, emotion, absurdity. They treat war like an open mic night at a comedy club and still win. Not because of the chaos, but because they're the only species that thrives in it. Revik stood in silence. Then slowly he turned back to the screen. It now displayed a recent encounter at the Zarnik's perimeter. Human Marines had faked engine failure, lured in a boarding crew with a distress call, and then ambushed them with foam darts, plastic bats, and what appeared to be high-decibel polka music. Somehow it worked. Skelth was no longer smirking. This level of unpredictability is destabilizing. What do we even call it? Yearn inhaled deeply. They call it Tuesday. Across the galaxy, commanders and war planners were beginning to discard entire shelves of predictive models. Every piece of data that had made sense for thousands of years no longer applied. Threat analysis was useless. The humans had redefined engagement, not through overwhelming firepower or superior tech, but through nonsense, harnessed nonsense, guided by intuition and unshakable confidence that anything might work. Revik issued a single directive: classify humans as variable class threat level, Omega. Effective immediately, all predictive algorithms must be recalibrated to account for whatever this is. Skelth's claws twitched as he leaned over the table. What's our counter-strategy? Yearn didn't blink. There isn't one. You can't out-strategize something that doesn't know what it's going to do next. Silence. Then the screen flickered again, revealing a final piece of footage. A lone human crouched beside a detonator in the middle of a trench. His squad was gone. He looked up at the drone camera, winked, and stuck a rubber chicken on the trigger. As the blast wave rolled out, the drone caught a final audio transmission. I bet none of you saw that coming. No one in the chamber spoke for a long time. Somewhere deep in the bowels of the tribunal, an AI recalculated war probabilities and quietly crashed. The tribunal's decision to escalate humanity to variable class threat level. Omega triggered an immediate ripple effect through every major species' military infrastructure. Neural strategy trees were wiped and rewritten. Ambassadors were recalled. Recruitment campaigns for elite tacticians were suspended. After all, how does one plan against improvisation? But the humans didn't seem to notice or care. They were too busy launching Operation Dandelion. No one understood the name. No one ever would. It involved 47 ships, none of which followed standard fleet formations, and a mysterious cargo listed only as classified but edible. They descended on the contested system of Renesis Theta, bypassed every fortified orbital platform with what analysts later described as reckless whimsy, and began dropping thousands of brightly colored balloons onto the surface of the planet's largest city. At first, the local defenders were baffled, then suspicious, then terrified. The balloons exploded, not with shrapnel, but with bursts of compressed glitter, loud pop music, and faint traces of human pheromones engineered to trigger confusion in 6 known species. Riot formations disintegrated as commanders tried to decipher whether this was a distraction or an act of psychological warfare. Meanwhile, a small human task force landed in the central courtyard, handed out sandwiches to civilians, and used sidewalk chalk to draw confusing diagrams labeled Phase B, probably. It was never clear what Phase A had been. By the time the opposing command center realized the humans were downloading critical defense schematics through a disguised ice cream cart, it was too late. The extraction vessel, disguised as a floating billboard for intergalactic mustache wax, had already jumped to hyperspace. In a closed-door debrief with the Solari Command, General Tralvik slammed his claws on the holotable. They weaponized hospitality. They turned kindness into a cloaking device. The assistant intelligence officer, a young Aquilon cadet, blinked nervously. Sir, with respect, I think they just did things. They didn't plan. They acted. And somehow it worked. Tralvik's eye ridges narrowed. That's what makes them so dangerous. We can prepare for enemies with intentions. We cannot prepare for ones with moods. Meanwhile, aboard the stubborn mule, Captain Briggs was fishing a sock out of an air duct. Got it, he grinned, holding it up like a prize. That's where all the static charge was coming from. Engineering, you should see a 10% increase in ion distribution efficiency now. His first officer, a towering brute of a man named Cole, squinted at him. "We're in the middle of a war zone. And you're playing janitor?" Briggs shrugged. "Weird energy affects morale. Morale affects decision-making. Decision-making wins wars." He took a bite out of a half-melted protein bar and casually kicked the bridge console back into diagnostic mode. Moments later, their ship received an encrypted transmission from an Allied vessel, an automated drone barge known as Resilience 9. Its message was simple: Tarkith fleet advancing. 300 ships. ETA 6 hours. Cole muttered, "Outnumbered 50 to 1. Briggs nodded. "Yep, let's send them a message." "What message?" Briggs pointed at the comms officer. "Broadcast the clip of that guy doing interpretive dance in zero gravity." Cole blinked. "Why?" "No reason, that's the point." The clip was sent. No warning, no explanation. Just a minute and a half of a bald Marine waving silk ribbons while slowly rotating in an airlock to classical music. Somewhere in the Tarkith command cruiser, an admiral stared at the footage in silence, his tendrils twitching in mild horror. Back on the mule, Briggs began rearranging empty crates in the cargo bay into a maze. "I assume this has a purpose," Cole said, watching. "It might." "You're improvising again." "No, I'm being prepared for a potential improvisation." Cole squinted. "That's not better." Briggs grinned. "That's humanity." As the mule plotted a wildly inefficient course through the outer ring of the Rhinos status system, one that mimicked the mathematical signature of a small nebula and temporarily confused enemy sensors into thinking the ship was part of a natural phenomenon, alien analysts across several species began cross-referencing ancient Earth folklore, trickster myths, and absurdist theater for possible insight. Nothing helped. One Frillian command AI eventually self-deleted after attempting to simulate a 48-hour period of human behavior. The error logs contained nothing but a looped phrase. Why did they bring a horse on a submarine? Back at the tribunal, Yearn was summoned again. He looked thinner, more drained, as if each cycle among humans had peeled away something fundamental from his worldview. Revok motioned him forward. "We intercepted another broadcast. It's just music. No codes, no threats, just lyrics about banana peels and metaphysical angst." Yearn sat down, rubbing his temples. "They're not taunting us. They're just being themselves." "Then explain this," Skelth growled, activating a new projection. It showed a fleet of human fighters peeling away from a major skirmish at Sarnak Point, only to return 20 minutes later from the opposite direction, wearing repainted hulls, emitting garbled jazz, and claiming to be a rival human faction called the Clown Corps. "They got behind our lines using style," Skelth said, voice cracking. "They weaponized aesthetic dissonance." "They once fought a skirmish using only flashlights and mirrors," Yearn said softly. "It worked." Vork slammed a data tablet down. "They shouldn't be winning." "They agree with you," Yearn replied. "That's why they laugh so much. They can't believe it either." As more reports came in of humans tricking a blockade by impersonating a food delivery service, or of an officer bluffing his way through enemy checkpoints by claiming to be a motivational speaker, the picture began to shift. This wasn't madness. This wasn't strategy. It was both. Humanity, it seemed, did not follow the branches of logic or honor the steps of tradition. They leapt, stumbled, twisted, and tripped their way forward, and dragged the rest of the galaxy along with them. One alien general described it as being locked in a chess match where the opponent occasionally flips the board, eats a pawn, and declares victory via dance-off. Yet somehow, every time, the humans made progress, and they were gaining ground. In deep space, near the contested moons of Trelvis 9, the mule rendezvoused with 2 other human ships, Spiteful Grin and Minor Inconvenience. Captain Briggs greeted their commanders over a video call, both of whom wore party hats. "Gentlemen," Briggs nodded, "ready to cause some confusion?" Captain Doyle of the Minor Inconvenience grinned. "We brought inflatable decoys and a flock of robotic pigeons." "And I," said the burly commander of the Spiteful Grin, "have a cow costume and zero shame." Briggs leaned back, hands behind his head. "Good. We'll make them doubt the very fabric of reality." As the humans finalized their plan, a chaotic, nonsensical web of decoys sabotage, distractions, and psychological sleight of hand, the alien forces dug in with heavy artillery and reinforced command structures. They thought they were prepared. They had no idea what was coming. The enemy fleet at Trelvis 9 had arranged itself with mathematical elegance. Tarkith dreadnoughts formed an armored wall across the orbital plane, flanked by precision-engineered frigates and support corvettes. Drone swarms patrolled the outer perimeter in perfect synchrony. Sensors scanned for known human signatures, calculating probability arcs and intercept vectors. They were ready for a textbook engagement. Unfortunately, humans never read the textbook. The first anomaly registered as harmless, a faint ping resembling an outdated music broadcast. Then came the distortion field, a fluctuating wave of holographic nonsense that bent light into the shape of dancing bananas and rotating top hats. By the time Command figured out the signal wasn't a joke, it was already too late. 3 human ships burst through the field. Stubborn Mule, Spiteful Grin, and Minor Inconvenience, zigzagging in illogical, erratic patterns. Their flight paths defied every simulation model, bouncing between gravitational nodes like pinballs. One spun in place and launched a parade of inflatable decoy shuttles shaped like various Earth animals. The Tarkith fired on them instinctively, wasting half their forward charge on holograms of squirrels and penguins wearing sunglasses. Then came the pigeons. Robotic and relentless, the autonomous bird drones swarmed across targeting sensors, dropping reflective shards and noise emitters tuned to the exact frequency of the Tarkith's command protocols. Confused captains barked contradictory orders. Shields flickered, firewalls glitched, and targeting systems spiraled into chaos. From behind the mess, Captain Briggs flew the Mule straight into the enemy formation, weaving through gaps with the casual ease of a man dodging traffic cones in a parking lot. "Status?" Cole answered from the weapons console. "They're chasing one of the decoys. Think they believe it's a real carrier." "Good," Briggs said. "Release the cow." The cargo bay opened. Out drifted a pressurized pod painted to resemble a spotted bovine. Inside was a high-output EMP array, wrapped in lead foil and bubble wrap. As the pod bounced through the chaos, it released a burst of static that crippled Tarkith coordination long enough for Minor Inconvenience to breach their flank and launch streamers packed with nanoshards that gummed up enemy exhaust ports. Human boarding teams landed on the primary dreadnought wearing mismatched armor and wielding non-standard weapons. One carried a baseball bat wrapped in anti-phase wiring. Another entered playing a harmonica loudly. The Tarkith crew, disciplined but overwhelmed, fell apart trying to adapt to the sheer absurdity. The final blow didn't come from a warhead or a fleet command. It came from a small data packet disguised as an in-flight survey. When opened by a Tarkith officer mid-battle, assuming it to be some form of human diplomacy, it executed a cascading logic loop that locked every command console into a permanent error state. The screen simply read, "How would you rate your destruction today?" 1 to 5 stars. By the time the remaining Tarkith ships fled, 2/3 of their fleet was disabled or hijacked. The humans, absurd and triumphant, left behind a single message beacon floating amid the wreckage. Its contents, a handwritten note scanned and transmitted in perfect clarity. "Don't worry, we're not mad, just curious." Back at the tribunal, the atmosphere was bleak. Reports from the Trelvis 9 engagement had gone viral across the galactic net. News feeds flashed with footage of human Marines using kazoo parades to confuse snipers, a pilot doing cartwheels mid-dogfight, and Briggs giving a rousing victory speech while casually flipping pancakes on the bridge. "They didn't just win," Skelth muttered, watching the replay. "They rewrote the rules." "Then we must adapt," Revok said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. "We must contain this chaos." Yearn, standing at the back, simply shook his head. "You can't contain them. You can't decode them. You can only encounter them." "What does that mean?" Vork demanded. "It means," Yearn said slowly, "that trying to classify humans with logic is like trying to measure laughter with a ruler. They don't just think outside the box. They've never acknowledged the box even exists." There was silence in the chamber, the kind of silence that only followed undeniable truth. Later, in a dimly lit corner of a transit station far from the tribunal's marble floors, An old trader sat across from a curious young Tarsian cadet. The cadet asked, "Is it true what they say? That humans are impossible to predict? Then how do you fight them? You don't. You try. And then you find yourself in a field hospital wondering why your entire battalion was routed by a guy in a clown wig driving a forklift." The cadet blinked. "That's impossible. That's human." Elsewhere aboard the stubborn mule, Briggs relaxed in the captain's chair, humming an off-key tune while reviewing the next operation. He had a new idea for psychological interference, something involving sock puppets in a fake talent show. Cole glanced up. "You think they'll fall for it?" "Probably not," Briggs said, grinning. "That's why we're going to do 3 fake ones before the real one." The galaxy had learned that war in human hands was no longer a contest of strategy or force. It was theater. It was jazz. It was a chaotic, ever-shifting storm of humor, instinct, and bold improvisation, fueled not by cruelty or conquest, but by sheer irrepressible curiosity and a refusal to play by anyone else's script. And as long as humans kept asking, "What if we tried something weird?" no one, anywhere, would ever sleep peacefully again.